Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the La Lita Loca Cruise podcast. And today we've got a very interesting episode. I talked to Mandy, the cruise planner. She is a cruise content creator over on TikTok, and she's a Texas cruiser. So I'm going to cover some interesting topics. We're going to talk about Texas cruising. We're going to talk about why people dislike Carnival, and we're even going to talk about why cruising is great. So a lot of interesting conversation. And it was my first time talking to Mandy. And here she is, Mandy, the cruise planner. All right, so I am here with Mandy, the cruise planner. And Mandy, I know you primarily from watching your TikTok content, so I have a whole lot of questions to ask. First and foremost, welcome, and second most, I guess. Tell me this: how did you get into cruising, and what cruise lines have you been on?
Well, I got into cruising years ago. One of the first real vacations that I ever took was on Carnival Cruise Line. My uncle took me, and I fell in love with cruising. I was like, "This is the most amazing thing ever." And so for years, I've been primarily cruising with Carnival or Royal Caribbean because I've cruised typically out of Galveston. And for years, I've just kind of cruised out of Galveston, did a couple of cruises in Miami with some family members, fell in love with NCL because at the time Norwegian had never, or they had cruised out of Houston for a very brief moment, at the port of Houston. They tried to compete with Galveston, and that was a huge dud. As we know now, Galveston just became kind of this juggernaut. It's now just expanding in such a way that I could not be more happy or more excited. But I just got into cruising because it was a great family vacation. And once I went to Miami and tried Norwegian, kind of just fell even more in love with cruising. But it's Galveston taking off the way that it has really propelled me to love it even more. And I've sailed on Norwegian, I've sailed on Carnival, and I've sailed on Royal Caribbean so far. I am this year, however, looking to expand into other cruise lines.
Really? So so Galveston really has blown up. I didn't start cruising until 2017, and probably 2018. I think we took our first trip to Galveston and went on a Carnival cruise. But now, if you look at Galveston now, you've got so many options down there. We've got Royal there now. We've got Carnival. Has MSC started sailing out of Galveston yet?
They start in November of this year.
Okay.
We are so excited. Nice new
Has the Princess ship showed up over there yet?
Yes, it's been the Regal Princess. Now, I don't know if you've been following that debacle, but it is. it has been.
We got some engine troubles over here.
It has been, especially we were, for the longest time, it was Carnival. And then Royal came in and we were like, yes, we finally have Royal. We finally have Carnival. And then we started to see this slow trickle. I think Disney was next. And it's only been in the last couple of years that Princess has been in to Galveston. But we were just so excited to have Princess in. And I think the first year they sailed the Ruby Princess out of Galveston, and that was a colossal success. Then they brought the Regal Princess in, and sadly, it's been difficult for those of us who sailed out of Galveston.
That will definitely turn you off. If all of a sudden the one offering you have from a cruise line is kind of a dud, it's it's kind of a roll of the dice if you're going to go down there and cruise. I love the fact that Galveston's getting a lot of love. The challenge for me, at least from Galveston, is you do tend to do a lot of Western Caribbean. But have you seen them start to expand out a little bit and go to some other parts of the Caribbean on longer cruises?
Oh, definitely. For the longest time, Carnival did offer a 7-day cruise to the Eastern Caribbean. One of the very first Carnival cruises that I took was actually a cruise that went to Key West and went to the Bahamas. And that was on the Carnival Magic, I think back in 2011, Yeah, but then you're right. There has been definitely a push towards the Western Caribbean, I think just because it's right there and it's just easier. But I am excited to say that they have heard the cruise lines have heard our lamentations. We have begged and played it and cried, please give us something else. And so, yes, we are seeing that. I think Carnival with Celebration Key They're definitely going to offer the Jubilee. I don't think it's this year, it's next year where they're going to offer it. And I know that Royal, at least I want to say like for 1 month in the summer, like every other cruise is to the Eastern Caribbean. It'll be an 8-day cruise as opposed, to a 7-day, because it needs a little bit more time to get from Galveston over to the Bahamas area.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we're a little bit further away. But yeah, the major downside and the number one thing that people cruising out of Galveston like to complain about is not Cozumel again.
Yeah.
I love Cozumel. I mean, I'll go there a million times. I love the place, but a lot of Galveston cruisers are frustrated because, and I was talking about this with a friend, with the larger ships, there's just less ports that they can go to. And while a lot of people in Galveston who like to cruise out of Galveston were complaining, we only get the smaller, older ships. We finally now have the bigger ships, but they're all going to, Roatan, Cozumel, Costa Maya. And sadly, our options for like Jamaica and even Grand Cayman have dwindled as we've gotten to better ships. So it's been a little bit of a trade-off.
That's true. You guys have an Oasis class ship down there now for Royal, right?
Yes.
Have you sailed on that yet?
I did. I sailed on Allure of the Seas last year when they first came to Galveston, and then Harmony of the Seas as well. And they were both magical.
So,
amazing.
if we're thinking about ship size, and you make a couple of really great points there, smaller ships, they do give you more flexibility to get into more cruise ports. But to me, I love a big ship because you have so many more amenities and entertainment options. You're probably like me, you probably like all cruise ships, but do you have a preference? You like the big ship? You like the little ship? You like the mid ship?
I think obviously I prefer the larger ships for a couple of reasons. One, I even though there's more people, I feel like I get lost in the crowd a little bit more. I've joked about this. I never ever thought in a million years I'd be a content creator. I never thought in a million. It was never my plan, to have as many followers as I have. And so I tend to have like social anxiety. So I love the larger ships, yeah, because I can get lost in it. People don't necessarily see you as much. And plus, like you, I love the entertainment options on the larger ships. But I will say that as the ships have gotten larger and larger and larger, there is a part of me that does love the smaller ships just for the nostalgia reasons, As I've gotten a little bit older now, I'm like, oh, nice smaller ship. It's kind of quaint, kind of cozy. So, but yeah, I tend to like the larger ships. The entertainment options are just, you can't beat them.
Yeah, especially on those Oasis class ships. I don't know, that Aqua Theater always kind of pushes me over the top. I'm like, wow, I can't believe they've got like this Aqua show on a cruise ship. Man, you bring up social anxiety and in the context of content creation, I think that's a really interesting topic. I'm an introverted guy, and so for me, and I'm sure you're running into it too, as more and more people know your face and they're familiar with you, and the cruising for me, I used to, when I first started, I was able just to blend into the crowd, just hide somewhere, not really be that noticed. And, I've caught some criticism sometimes because there's like a whole old school cruiser that's like, cruising's about eating dinner with strangers and, going swimming with weird people. It's like, nah, that's not really what cruising's about for me. I like to go to my shows by myself and go off to the side and just do that kind of thing. How's it been for you as more people have started to recognize you? What did you have to do to kind of get used to that, or are you still in the process of figuring it out?
Well, I'm definitely still a work in progress, but I will say it's gotten a lot easier. When I first started my TikTok account, I really didn't think many people would recognize me, and I noticed that when I got up to like 10,000 followers, I would have like one or two people. But as that number has gotten higher and higher, I definitely have started to notice more and more people. And actually, by just being honest about it on my account and telling people like, hey, I never thought I would blow up like I did. I have social anxiety. So if you come up to me and I'm kind of weird, it's not you, it's me. That has been so helpful just by telling people that. And then also it's actually been kind of great because it really has forced me out of my shell for sure. Like it's been a very humbling experience in that, like when people would come up and they would talk, I would start to sweat. I would start to get nervous. I would start to like kind of stutter. But just by being honest about it, and so many people are they're cool about it. And also too, at least in my respects, I know you're on YouTube, but you have like a different like audience. Like I will say this as somebody who is, with the TikTok fan, I did start to branch out and do more with my TikTok, with my YouTube account, and also with my Instagram account. And I've realized there is a very different audience for YouTube versus for TikTok. And I will say that my TikTok followers have always just been like actually really courteous about it and just really cool about it, a little more personal. But I mean, I'm just discovering with YouTube. I don't know about your experience, but so far everybody's been for the most part pretty lovely.
Yeah, I mean that's fascinating to think about the differences between the social media platforms in that way. For the most part, and I'm sure you would agree. I feel very lucky that we get to make stuff and that people like it, and the fact that people want to come and meet us is because we make stuff and people like it. So it's really a testimony that people are digging our stuff, which I think is really cool as somebody who likes to make stuff, and I can't appreciate it enough, and I feel crazy lucky to live the life that I live. But like you, I had to go on and make a video and say, hey, look, you may not have the best interaction with me. Like I'm really only good for a few minutes. And, I would love to meet you and shake your hand and take a picture and all that stuff. But if you get me past 5 minutes, I really kind of start to freak out. And some people responded well to that message. And some people were like, oh, that's the risk, you put yourself out there. And so, but again, as what was weird for me is I really got a lot of traction during the shutdown. So you have this long period where nobody's on cruise ships, and go from like medium to a little larger, and then all of a sudden we go back on cruise ships for the first time, and it just became just meeting so many people. It was really cool, but it took me a little bit to figure it out. But yeah, so you survived the TikTok ban. What was it, like 8 hours the other night?
12.
12 hours. Were you freaking out? Like, this is the biggest way that you communicate with people? And I'm not being personal. I don't know how much of your your livelihood's tied to your TikTok content, but I'm assuming for people that make all their money on TikTok, and I saw some other big creators on that platform, that had to be pretty scary.
Yeah, no, I'm very blessed in that I have a, very fruitful career outside of TikTok. Like I said, TikTok was really, I originally started doing it because I would plan cruises for my family and my friends. I'm that type A family member, that friend that, is like, well, have you done this yet? Have you done this yet? Never mind, just hand me your stuff and let me do it for you. And so within my family and my friends, it was, oh, Mandy, she's the cruise planner. Just hand it off to her. And so when I created my TikTok, it was just on the side. It was mainly for them because I got tired of repeating myself over and over again. And so I was like, here, go to my TikTok and all my stuff is there. And then other people showed up and started watching my videos. So I'm blessed in that this was always, I accidentally stumbled into it. It wasn't like a career choice for me. But I was nervous in the sense that like you said, you do all this work. At one point, it's very much so a passion project. I love cruising. I love traveling and I love helping people. So my TikTok account has really been like a love letter to cruising and travel. And so for me, it was more being frustrated, like, is all this work that I've made just going to kind of evaporate? And I was able to back up a lot of it. And I have made the decision that no matter what, I am going to always from here on, share my stuff on Instagram and also on YouTube. Even if nobody else ever watches it, at least I know, hey, my work is there. So I can go back and reference it. And more importantly, send my family members and my friends to go back and reference it as well. But for me, it was more like all this stuff that I made and that I built, it just would make me sad if it was all for naught. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, a lot of people were freaking out. I do have a lot of friends who are full-time content creators who have put their whole livelihoods into it, and they were absolutely freaking out. Absolutely.
I'm kind of slow and late to the TikTok game. Like I saw it coming and I never really got hit with it. I didn't do very well, but what can you kind of track, like if you follow TikTok long enough to know kind of what the rise of the cruise content creators on TikTok, it seems like there's a lot of them. So is it a big community? Do you guys connect with each other a lot? I feel like I've seen some of your videos where you've cruised with other TikTok content creators. What's the vibe like for creator community over there?
The creator community is pretty kind and pretty approachable. I do love that we interact with each other. I think there are some accounts that are maybe, I think that's in all industries. There's always that, person that's hyper competitive and maybe is a little more to themselves. But for the most part, we're a pretty close knit community. And we pretty much go out of our way, to interact positively with each other. I'm very blessed. I've got my friend Johnny Tsunami. He's amazing. And then I've also have my friend Courtney. She's Food Flights and Fun, the Shrinking Creative, and the three of us just gel really well, and we do travel together, and we have a good. Maybe not as good of a relationship as like you and Dawn, which, by the way, I love when you guys go on a cruise together. I love that friendship. I love that whole interaction that y'all have with each other. But yeah, there is definitely a community that is pretty tight knit, and we try to take care of each other. And like I said, I'm blessed enough that I was upset more that I was going to lose my content more than any kind of financial compensation. But yeah, it definitely is an interesting time, and like I said, it's a very different like audience over on Instagram and also on YouTube, and so sometimes maybe the work doesn't translate in the same way on the different mediums, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where everything goes with TikTok. But I love travel content. I mean, I was watching your videos through the pandemic as well, and I'm just like stunned that I'm even talking to you right now because I was watching you.
I appreciate that. It's so funny. I just everything still seems, and it's weird or maybe cliche to say, but everything still seems fresh to me. Like we're coming up on 8 years, which is bizarre to me because that's a long time to do anything. And when we first started making, my wife and I started making content on YouTube back in 2017, there was a small community of creators. But of course, through the pandemic, everything exploded. And then, as you saw TikTok come on board, there's so many more people. And, like you, I just feel very blessed to be able to do a thing that, for me, I'm lucky that I can, make a living this way. I used to have people say the other thing that'll get you sometimes, like, don't you think you should still have a real job? And it's like, dude, do you know what it takes to, run this little media business? It feels like a real job to me, but, back in the day, I used to go to an office job and listen to some dude I didn't like, talk to me about golf and then try to get me to do work for him. So I feel so much better to be my own boss. But I appreciate you saying that you watched during the pandemic. Again, it was a tough time for everybody. And I just felt like I was in the right place at the right time. I was making those videos almost just to stay connected to the world, right? Everybody's just locked down in their little house or whatever. And so it was so cool to be able to talk about cruising stuff and still talk to people through the pandemic. So I appreciate that you watched. So you said you've done Norwegian, you've done Carnival, you've done Royal Caribbean. What other cruise lines what's on your short list? If you could snap your fingers tomorrow and go on a cruise, which cruise line would you go on?
I really, really want to give MSC a try, mainly because they're building this big new terminal in Galveston. And so I've really, I've gotten more questions about MSC than I ever have before. And I know it's because of the new terminal that's coming in. So, I mean, obviously I would love to get on MSC. Princess is definitely on my bucket list this year for sure. And then Celebrity at some point, I think. And I mean, to be honest with you, I could sail on all of them. There's just so many now. And of course, Virgin Voyages, I get a lot more conversations about Virgin Voyages now than ever before. I probably at least once a week, somebody says, when is Virgin coming to Galveston? And I'm like, honey, don't hold your breath for any time soon. Would love it though. Would love it. But yeah, but MSC is kind of the one that I'm looking at the most, mainly because they're going to be in Galveston shortly. And we're just so excited about it. Galveston is like the small island. And on one hand, there's this feeling of, oh, there's too many cruise ships. The traffic's already bad enough. But we also get very excited that another one's coming in because we have more options. So we're like, it's fine. Just one more. So, but MSC, I'm super excited about.
Yeah, you just reminded me, like, I think the last time I was in Galveston, I cruised on the Jubilee. I feel like it was last year sometime. And the traffic was a nightmare. Now, we had a very aggressive Uber driver, he was an Uber driver. and he cut a bunch of people off, and he got us up there, and he dropped us off, and it was all good. But we ran into people later on that cruise, and they were like, I tell you what, we're just sitting here and we got our gun on the bench seat beside me. I was afraid somebody was going to get shot out front today. That's what the people were telling us. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, well, you're cruising from Texas. Everybody's rolling with some sort of gun. I was like, not everybody. And they're like, it was intense, but they were talking about like, an hour delay to get in, just trying to cross that road there, and so hopefully, and that's the challenge sometimes, I think, with expansion, is a lot of times the plans for expansion are pretty well thought out, but the plans for the infrastructure to support the expansion not as well thought out. So unfortunately, I feel like it's a build it and they will come. And now I'm assuming Galveston's struggling to like, okay, let's get better road system, because it's not easy to get into that port. It's just a few blocks to get you in there. So I think once they crack that nut, which Port Canaveral is having the same problem. They've really blown up over the last couple of years, and the infrastructure is struggling there. So, I think now that we're back from the pandemic, I think that, everybody's going to start getting that in place, but it's going to be some growing pains. MSC out of Galveston will be a pretty interesting scenario. Yeah, I find people either love or hate MSC. I've cruised it out of Miami, and I think I've cruised it out of Port Canaveral also. It's a very diverse and international type clientele. So, they give their announcements in multiple languages. And I've been on some ships where you could tell it made some people uncomfortable to have that level of diversity. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out in Texas. The cruises I've done out of Texas, they felt very Texas, right? Even the Jubilee is very oriented toward Texas. I think everybody would be fine. I'm not, saying anything against Texas with the MSC, but everybody, every time I've gone on MSC, I've run into at least a small segment of the cruisers that are like, why do they got to talk in so many different languages and, all this kind of stuff. So I think it's challenging that way to some cruisers. The early reviews of MSC was people didn't like it for those kind of things. I loved it. I like the diversity of the thing, the different kind of food, different kind of entertainment. So yeah, you got to check it out, because I think you would dig it.
No, no, and I'm very excited to see, because all the things you brought up, I'm very excited to see how MSC is going to tackle dealing with Texans. I think that this, like, and I say, because you're not wrong. We are definitely our own unique brand of American. We are definitely different, and food is like very important to us. And I don't say this just because I have struggled with weight issues myself. I mean this like culturally. We love good food, and the number one criticisms, like you mentioned, are speaking in the multiple languages. I know a lot of people have taken issue with that, and then also the food on MSC. And then also too, like I've heard that the entertainment is also kind of geared more towards the European style and less American style. So like, I'm not going to even lie to you, Tony, like a part of me just wants to be on, like, if not the inaugural sailing, but at least the sailing after, just if only to see how this is all going to play out, like good or bad. Like I'm kind of invested in just that, because I do know, I have heard from people from that, or they claim anyway, that MSC is like fully aware that going into Galveston, they're going to be dealing with Texans, because we can be something. And so I think that they're aware of that. And I hopefully the food, they just make sure that, as long as they have some decent pizza and some chicken nuggets, I think we're going to be fine.
I have like some barbecue. No, I was just flashing back. I went to a YouTube conference in Dallas last year, and I ended up at some barbecue place, and I had a beef rib that was like the size of my head. It was like, it was the craziest big, I like barbecue. I lived a lot of time in, Tennessee, so I know Memphis barbecue. I lived in North Carolina. I know North Carolina barbecue, but that Texas barbecue culture is a whole thing, man. And
it's beef.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah.
We're crazy about our beef, and we're very particular about it as well. And, Texans have a lot of different opinions. I mean, like I've seen people in Texas like fight over, whether to wrap your brisket in butcher paper versus aluminum foil, or even if you should wrap it at all. I mean, I've seen people like get into full blown arguments. So, I mean, we have very strong opinions, and that's just with barbecue. So that MSC with the food in particular, but I think as long as their pizza's good and they have at least some decent like chicken nuggets on there, we're going to be okay. But
it's going to be interesting.
I'm excited to see it, and I'm excited. It's going to be right next to the Royal Caribbean Terminal, which is just stunningly beautiful. Royal Caribbean really outdid itself in Galveston with their terminal, and I'm excited to see because you mentioned the Jubilee and you mentioned that it was difficult for you, when you went on the Jubilee, and I can tell you when I went on the Jubilee in August, the same. I mean, you were talking about your aggressive Uber driver. I was the driver, and I was aggressive, and yeah, no, it was. I'm not going to say it was Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome, but it was definitely testy. People, especially with the Carnival terminal, the parking situation over there is not nearly as great as like Royal Caribbean's brand new terminal. And then I'm excited because the MSC is going to share that terminal with Norwegian, and they're going to have like a multi-layered parking garage. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that it's going to be amazing, and I wish them like all the success because just more competition.
Didn't you? What was the Norwegian ship? Didn't you go on one of the new Norwegian ships? Did you go
I
on the Viva or something?
I went on the Prima. I went on the
Prima.
Prima last year, and I'm actually going on the Prima again next month. So that's
Okay.
I'm doing a redo. I was in the
What did you
Haven.
think about? What did you think about no, that's your only Norwegian ship that you've been on?
No, I've been on the Bliss, and I've also been on the Norwegian Sky.
There we go. So that's an interesting conversation. What do you think about the Prima compared to those other two ships?
When I booked the Prima, I had already been kind of warned by several like Norwegian aficionados. They'd already told me, they were like, "Hey, this one's different. This has a very different, look and feel to it, kind of futuristic. It's supposed to be like more intimate. So like because I went on the Norwegian Bliss in October of 2023, and it was magical. I went to Alaska. It was magical. It was just fell in love. I was like in this total Norwegian glow. And then I booked the Norwegian Prima, and some of my Norwegian friends who'd already been on the Prima, they were like, "Hey, hey, hey, yeah, this is not gonna be the Bliss." Like, and it's a very divisive ship. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was lovely. I think the Indulge Food Hall is genius. Loved Indulge Food Hall. But yeah, I could see where some of their complaints were. But I mean, overall, I'm pretty easy to please. You have to be really bad for me not to have a good time because I love cruising so much. I'm kind of like, oh, I've got to, as long as my room is clean and I've got an ocean view, or I can see the ocean, and I'm great. I'm gonna have a good time. But I liked it, but I could see there were definitely times where it was like congested, and I never even made it to the Rumors Fleetwood Mac tribute because it was in that small little area, and I was not going to wait over an hour to I'm not going to do it. But I've heard they're moving it into the main theater now, and I've heard they've made some changes, and I'm excited to go see how it's changed from last year. But last year I was in the Haven, and this year I'm actually going to be in an inside cabin. So talk about a disparity. So this is going to be fun. I'm
I, I
looking
got
forward to it.
I got lucky. So my first cruise on the Bliss, I was in the Haven, and very kindly, that was something that the NCL provided for me. And I definitely came away from that cruise saying that saving for the Haven has to be a phrase, because that was probably the nicest cruise experience I ever had. They had that observation lounge. Well,
Mm.
I don't know if you saw the Haven on the Bliss, but under the regular observation lounge, they had this other observation lounge just for the Haven people, and it was empty all the time. It was one of the best cruise experiences I ever had. I took Encore to Alaska. I think those ships are great for Alaska with that observation deck and that kind of thing. But I cruised the Prima, I think, when it first came out. And, I think the complaints that people had, and I'm like you, like, I feel like the way you feel about a thing is really kind of up to you. So it's hard for me sometimes to review cruise ships and to come up with something negative, because I try to just feel good about things all the time. Like, that's kind of how I get through my day. But I did I like the Prima. I like the Starbucks there, but I never got to the rumor show. I heard it from outside, because the one thing I can't do is I cannot wait an hour or an hour and a half to get into a place that I may just stand up. To me, that even like if you think about the Jubilee down there, they've got that nice center stage where they have entertainment. And, sometimes you got to show up there an hour, hour and a half to get a good seat to see a show. And to me, that's just like, I don't want to waste time like that on a cruise ship. I'm kind of funny too. I don't want to go to chef's table because it just takes too long, and I feel like you're spending too much time. But yeah, so I'm interested. I'm going to go on the Aqua when it comes out, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. So they're going to move Rumors into into the main theater, and then they're developing the Prince show, which I'm a kid of the '80s, so I'm a big Prince fan. So I'm looking forward to that. I really do I like Norwegian, of course. I like them all, really. Like, that's when somebody says, "What's your favorite cruise line?" I just like, "What's the next one on the schedule?" That's my favorite. So I'm excited about that. So yeah, I've never seen that terminal for Royal down in Galveston, and now MSC's coming. So I've got to. I guess I got to get back to Galveston. I was shocked that like you mentioned, Don, my buddy Don, just out of the blue, he lets me know, "Hey, I'm getting on a cruise ship tomorrow in Galveston for a 10-day sailing," and I'm like, "Oh, dude, I could have done that. I had 10 days before my next cruise. That would have been fun." But it sounds like the ship is broken down right now, so he's on the struggle bus. So I don't know about that. But you mentioned going to Alaska, which is definitely a bucket list destination. And you've been to the Caribbean, Eastern, Western Caribbean. Have you been to any of those other bucket list destinations? And if not, what are some of your bucket list destinations?
Well, funny enough, I found your channel right before I was going to take a European cruise. I was I was going to be on the Norwegian. Uh, what's the real controversial one? I'm trying to remember what the real controversial one was. Epic. I was supposed to be on the Norwegian Epic in May of 2020, and I was going to sail to. I was going to do Barcelona and then Italy and all of that, but obviously COVID took that out, and that's how I actually found your channel. Was watching all your cruise videos. So obviously, I would love to get a second chance to go back to Europe. I would. I would. That's definitely on the bucket. I just, with my schedule, because I do have a full-time job outside of cruising. So for me, like, I can get these 7 days away, but like anything longer than that, and then obviously if you're going to Europe, you need a little more time, for the travel, etc. But I definitely would love to go to Europe and maybe even do like an Asian cruise. Have you done an Asian cruise yet?
Yeah, so early on, so not to make it about Don and I, but we've met each other early 2018. We'd known each other virtually, but he surprised Jenny and I on a cruise, on the MSC cruise on the seaside. He showed up, and during that cruise, we said, "Hey, let's go to Japan." I mean, it was just like I'd barely cruised. I'd never left the continent. Like, for work before, I'd gone to Canada, I'd gone to Mexico, I'd stayed on North America, and we hatched this plan in February that in October of 2019, I'm not saying we were over there right before COVID hit, but October of 2019, we're going to fly to China, and then we're going to jump on a cruise ship and do eight port stops in Japan. And it was awesome. I mean, Japan was the first place. I didn't have a lot of cruises under my belt at that time. Japan was the first place that I went on a cruise ship where I was like, "Oh, I should have just come here for a month if I could have pulled that off," because it was very fascinating. But like China, the job I had previously, I had a team in China, and so I'd worked with a couple Chinese guys, and they were telling me like, "Oh, it's crazy over here in Shanghai. We all live on top of each other, and we're not allowed to have more than one kid, and we live with our parents." And it sounded really oppressive. And then I got to China, and I was like, "Oh wow, it really is like that." There's just miles and miles of these concrete apartment buildings with clotheslines and just millions of people stacked on top of each other. And you go to the cruise terminal, and it's lined with the Chinese flags, and there's military people there. You go in, and it was the first time ever I had to surrender my passport. They're like, "Hey, just give us your passport and we'll give it back to you, promise." And I was like, "Promise? What do you mean, promise?" And but we got on the cruise ship, and they did give it back to us in Japan at some point. But so then, but it's a whole story. We were in China for a few days. Don's a big Disney fan. We went to Shanghai Disney. I don't really care about Disney, but I like all the ancillary stuff like Marvel and Star Wars. But so we go to Chinese Disneyland, Shanghai Disney, whatever the thing's called, and they email us and say, "Hey, there's a typhoon coming in. Could you come to the cruise port?" And so the day that we left China, Shanghai, we were trying to outrun a typhoon, and so that was how our trip to Japan began. But it was amazing. It was amazing. I would highly recommend that. I was fortunate enough to go to Australia for New Year's Eve, and was able to be in the harbor for the New Year's fireworks. I've been very lucky. I got to do a lot of that stuff. I have a lot of flexibility in my schedule, but so many great places. Like, most of the time I tell people that have cruised the Caribbean, go to Alaska. But then certainly what you're saying, Europe's amazing, and any of those other places, Japan, China. But like another good one that I did late in the game was just that East Coast New York up to Canada, up into Quebec. That's a pretty accessible 7-day cruise also, which is kind of a neat. I like it because I don't love the hot weather so much. I don't like being cold like we're cold now, but it's nice to be in a cooler weather place. So, um, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So that's a tough thing. And again, I'm fortunate when we first started, I had still worked my full-time job for a couple years, and it was tough to get time off. So do you ever get the FOMO? You see your people that maybe are just doing content creation and you're like, I want to go on some more cruises.
All the time. I all the time. No, no, really. I think that there's a practical part of me that will always be like hesitant, to like fully embrace full-time content creation. I think there's a part of me that always feels like I need a real job on some level. And then when all this TikTok ban stuff started, I was like, oh, thank God. Thank God I'm good. But yeah, no, I see it all the time where I have friends that are like traveling all over and going to all these amazing places. And I definitely, I think if I could, I'd be on a cruise ship all of the time. I don't know that I would necessarily live on a ship, full time, but I could see myself easily, cruising 1 week on, 1 week off. I love it. There's so many places I want to go to. The Norwegian fjords look like absolutely incredible. I look at those Norwegian cruises, and it looks like Europe's version to Alaska. And we all know, I tell people all the time, Alaska. For the longest time, I didn't want to go on an Alaskan cruise. I was a exclusive hot cruise girly. Like I was used to the Caribbean, and people were always like, Mandy, you need to go to Alaska. And I couldn't wrap my head around it. I thought, that's really cold. I'm a like sit out in the sun and sip a margarita kind of girly. I just didn't see how it would be great. And I've joked about it many, many times on my TikTok account. The minute, I would say by day 2 of my Alaskan cruise, I'm not even kidding. I was like outside and I'm like watching the bears and a mountain and like an eagle go by and some whales. I mean, I started like looking up real estate in Alaska. I'm like, how can we
Wow.
live here? Yeah, no, and I'm not a nature girly. Okay. I'm very much so. I like my Wi-Fi. I like controlled temperature. I love electricity. I'm not a wilderness kind of girly, but Alaska just did something to me. I was like, turns out I'm not like a Texas nature girly. I'm more of a like an Alaska. Of course, I went in October. Okay, like I'm sure somebody would say, yeah, somebody who lives in Alaska during the winter, yeah, try that. But no, Alaska's just incredible, and I just fell so head over heels in love with Alaska. I try to tell people when they're asking about cruises, about like kind of what their ideas are, what their styles are. I try to tell them, don't be afraid, to kind of think outside the box and at least be willing to take one cruise that maybe you thought you wouldn't like. Because, like I said, for the longest time, I refused to go to Alaska, and Alaska has been by far my favorite cruise. And so that's one of the reasons why I've been like looking at like Norway. I'm like, that just looks absolutely amazing. And I saw recently, not too long ago, a video of you where you were in like, I think it was Iceland, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
That looked amazing. See,
Yeah,
like,
I let Don talk me into a lot of stuff. We flew to Southampton in the UK we flew to London, and then we went to Southampton to get on a cruise that went to Greenland and Iceland. And so and then we went back to Southampton, and it was so funny on the flight home, the ridiculously annoying long flight home, we flew right over where we were at. I was like, wow, I could have just went home from here. The next time I go to Greenland and Iceland, I'm doing it from North America. Yeah, it was crazy when we went to Greenland. We did a iceberg tour, and it was neat. I'm like that too. So for years before I went to Alaska, I don't remember what was the first year that we went to Alaska, but we'd have live streams or something like that. People like, what about Alaska? Are you going to go to Alaska? And I'm like, isn't that all outside? I don't really like outside. I'm not really interested in being outside, especially like in Florida. It's so hot here and all this stuff. But that first trip to Alaska, I was like, can I go back to Alaska? Like, is this something that we can do every year? Like, I got lucky on the very first cruise. We did whale watching,
and we like a pod of orca came to our little boat and followed us for a half an hour. And even the naturalist on board was like, "Oh, this never happens. Like you never see this. We thought you might see some humpback whale. We never get the orca." And so it was like, I don't play golf anymore, and I used to work at corporate America. I would go out with these guys, and golf is a stupid game, right? It's hard, but then you hit one shot good, and you're like, "Oh, this is the best thing ever." That's what those orcas were for me. I'm like, I could come back to Alaska every year. The second time we went out there, I think we paid $400 for a bear excursion, spent 4 hours going out to some salmon hatchery, didn't see one bear. And they were like, yeah, it says in the contract, we might not see any bear. I'm like, wow, that was expensive to not see any bear. But I had the orca the time before. So but nah, it's, yeah, cruising's just these conversations just remind me how great cruising is. One thing I want to circle back around to, you said you haven't gone on Virgin yet. I'll tell you the one thing about Virgin that really blew my mind. And like, I got 6 kids. I raised a bunch of little kids. They're all older now. There are no kids on Virgin, which that like intellectually, that. But then once you actually get on board, it is so palpable. Like you just start, it's an amazing thing to cruise without a bunch of kids. And look, I love kids and no shade on people that have kids or anything like that. But even like this cruise I took earlier in the month on Margaritaville at Sea, like, I don't know, like 10 o'clock at night, there's this kid just running, banging on the doors, that kind of thing. I'm like, oh, I did not miss that at all on Virgin Voyages. So yeah, if you ever get a chance, try the Virgin Voyages for sure. So let's talk a little bit about a common theme that I think you deal with on your TikTok, Carnival hate. This is one of my favorite. Like if you go back to some of my early videos, I used to get so annoyed when people would call I started cruising with Carnival. I think Carnival is definitely like the gateway, the entryway, the gateway drug to cruising. So many people start cruising because of Carnival. But man, there's like a whole segment of snooty people out there that probably have never cruised on Carnival that hate Carnival. And certainly Carnival does a good job of bringing all kinds of people on a cruise ship. They have really great price points, so any budget can get on a cruise ship. And I just never understood why people kind of poo-poo on other people's cruise experience. What's been some of your, I hear you reference your comments sometimes. What are the most common Carnival hater complaints?
Well, here's the thing. I think that like you mentioned, Carnival is like that gateway into cruising. I think for a lot of people, Carnival was their very first cruise. Mine was actually Royal Caribbean. But the vast majority of people I know, when I ask them, like, what was the first cruise line you sailed on? That you sailed on, the majority will say Carnival. I think for a lot of people, there's this idea that because it is so accessible to people, that it is kind of to be looked down upon. I hear people say, well, it's a budget, it's a budget, but don't we like a good bargain? At the end of the day, and let's be honest with you, I sailed on Harmony of the Seas in June of last year. And then like 7 weeks later, I was on the Carnival Jubilee. And I'm telling you right now, the price points were not very different, especially with the Excel class ship. The pricing is very competitive with the Royal Caribbean, for sure. And so I just think a lot of people remember Carnival too for their older ships. They've obviously been around for so long, and they've been. I think that's another issue too, is that Carnival has been the presence, the biggest of the cruise lines for so long, and it's easy to kind of attack the giant. And because their fleet is, let's be real too. Like I love Carnival, and I say this with absolutely no shade, because I right now, if Carnival was like, we want you on the breeze right now, honey, I would go. I love Carnival. I love cruising. But some of the stylistic decisions of some of the Carnival cruise ships, I've been honest, like, really? What's with all the orange? Somebody said in my comments one time that Carnival cruise ships looked like they were designed by drag queens on acid. And I thought that was the funniest quote I'd ever heard in my life, because the stylistic decisions are kind of all over the place. And that's no shade. I mean, obviously I love the new Excel class designs. I think these are absolutely beautiful, but for the life of me, I could not figure out why all the suites were orange. And I'm from Texas, where like Whataburger is king, so everything's the orange down here. But like, I just think that Carnival, because a lot of their ships are older, and also because they're in more ports, right? You have them like Mobile, kind of the less popular ports, and they've been very smart and resourceful in putting their older ships in these places. But as a result, I think the pricing is a little bit lower on these ships, and it's got kind of the reputation of I hate to say it, but ratchet. That's the term that I've heard. And it's made me furious in a lot of respects, because at the end of the day, yes, I mean, especially in Texas, all the Carnival cruises, from my experience out of Galveston, not now because we obviously have the nicer ships, but when Galveston was like a newer port that was just kind of gaining traction, a lot of the ships were a lot older. They were more mature, and we had, it was redneck town. I mean, it was just a lot of rednecks that were excited that they could go on a weekend cruise, and that's what you saw. And I think the other cruise lines, not being as large as Carnival, have been able to kind of watch Carnival, see what works, see what doesn't work, and they've been able to kind of refine their experience. But especially now with the Excel class ships, I just feel like the hatred is really unwarranted. And it's so funny because for the longest time, I've said Royal Caribbean was one of my absolute favorite cruise lines, and with maybe Norwegian being number two. But with all the Carnival hate, like, it's really made me like dig in on my Carnival love. And I'm so glad because I had a fantastic time on the Carnival Jubilee. I think Carnival's a great cruise line, but yeah, I do think that when you are the number one and when you have this reputation that you have and you've been in it for longer than anybody and you do have older fleet, sadly, I do think that sometimes that does make you an easier target.
Yeah, it's so funny. I don't know why I get so impassioned about it. I just hate seeing people hate on something for really no good reason. Because the other thing is, I know so many people that Carnival is their favorite cruise line, and there's just nothing wrong with anybody liking one cruise line over another, which is it's just a weird thing. All right, let me hit you with a couple of rapid fires. MDR, buffet, or specialty dining?
Specialty dining.
Specialty dining. What's your favorite specialty dining that you've experienced?
Well, I'm from Texas. It's going to be a steakhouse, right? I'm a big. One of my favorite things to do is get on a cruise ship and check out the steakhouse. Obviously, Royal Caribbean, their chops has been incredible. It delivers almost every time. Cagney's is great. I've had great experiences on Carnival with their steakhouse as well, but I'm a sucker for a good steak. And a lot of people like to complain about specialty dining, how it's not necessary. And they're absolutely right. It's not necessary. I've actually had decent steak, especially on Royal. I will tell you right now, Royal, their main dining room has a really good steak. I'm from Texas. I mean, we're very particular about our steak. It's pretty good. I mean, is it as good as the chops? No, but it's still very, very good. But, I've had a lot of people, they complain about the pricing, but, here in Texas, to go to a steakhouse that the same quality of Cagney's or Fahrenheit, on Carnival or Chops, I mean, you would easily be paying, 100, 115 a person. And it still blows me away that you can get as nice of a dinner as you can on a cruise ship for the price that you can get for the specialty dining. I know that the pricing, I'm sure people are going to be like, oh, but the pricing keeps going up. It does, but the pricing on everything is going up. But I enjoy specialty dining.
No escaping these price increases. I think Disney just raised their gratuities today or something like that. What's the correct cut of beef to order at any steakhouse?
Well, that's a contentious thing. I mean, you've got the rise of the tomahawk. That's kind of the trendy thing right now. And they look really cool for sure. Most Texans are going to say ribeye. Probably ribeye would be the most popular. New York strip is actually, believe it or not, very popular even in Texas. And then you've got your sirloin probably down below. Texans are like, oh, well, the problem with sirloin is it can tend to get a little bit dry. You got to have a little bit of fat on it, which is why that ribeye. Yep, Texas ribeye.
I know I should be choosing the filet because it's tender and it's pink, but man, I got to have that marbleized. I need some fat in my steak, so I like the ribeye too. So that's my choice. Okay, so main dining room, and there's two cruise lines that I'm thinking about. Do we like tablecloths or no tablecloths, or do we care?
I don't really care as long as the food is good. Like for me, here's the thing, and I brought this up on my account too. It is such a fascinating time to be a cruiser because you still have your older cruisers, which is pre-2020, right? I mean, most of the cruisers who who sailed all the time before COVID, they were much more into the formal aspect. Maybe not into getting like all dressed up for formal night in the way that, you know, generations before had, but there was still like a formality to it. And I will say that post COVID, it is a whole new world. I mean, surely you've seen that just in your audience alone. I mean, just in my TikTok, it's been insane how radically different it has shifted. I mean, now people are more concerned about like quality. I will say that. And people are willing to pay extras for things if they feel that they're getting a good value for it. Whereas like older cruisers are upset because they expected it, you know, because that was what was included. You're watching like this slow unraveling of all these things that used to be included. But you know, the thing is, like, if it's a good value, like, I don't care if it's got a tablecloth or not. Is the food good? Does it taste good? Like, I'll even take, and maybe this is a controversial take, and I've said this before, I'll take even smaller portions if the food tastes really good. Like, for me, it's about the quality. But I know for some people, though, they really want to stick to like the old way of doing things. And to those people, I say, I feel you, but you must adjust because things are changing rapidly. I mean, and I think it's going to continue to change rapidly because I've talked about this on my account. Is you have all these mega ships now. All of the cruise lines are kind of gravitating towards them. You're getting the private island experience with the success of Coco Cay or Coco Key. Don't get mad at me. Somebody always gets mad at me between the Coco Cay versus Coco Key discourse. I don't know if you get much of it over on YouTube, but on TikTok, I mean, it could turn into a bloodbath over there on how you pronounced it. God bless Carnival for just calling it Celebration Key, Key. Thank you, Carnival, for that. But I think with the rise of the private islands and the private spaces and then the mega ships, we're just seeing like a whole change to the entire industry, for better or for worse. You know, and when you've got that many people, it's harder to necessarily clean the tablecloths, right? Because you got thousands more tables. I mean, are you a big stickler for the older way, or are you more adaptable like I am?
So when I first started, I can't remember if Carnival had tablecloths when I first started, but I did, like, the first time I went on Royal, my first was an Oasis of the Seas, probably it was 2018. I just remember how nice the dining room was. I think it's really nice. Sometimes, look, I got my own little weird pet peeves. Like, I don't like when a glass makes that pile of water when it sweats. And so as long as like I don't have water on that slick Carnival table, I'm happy, and I'm with you. I like the you know, as long as the food's good and as long as they give you that side plate that's got the Lincoln Memorial on it. I love that. Sorry, Frank. That's got to be my favorite thing. I don't know why, but yeah, I'm cool with that. But like recently, when I was on the Margaritaville at Sea cruise, they had one of the dining rooms had tablecloths, and I was like, oh, this is kind of nice. But you know, to your point, it's a lot of challenge and a lot of expense. I do like what you said about a smaller portion. You know, what I've seen as cruising's come back, they've had to figure out how to reduce their overall operating costs. And so you've seen a lot of things go away, like the 2-day room cleaning, which a lot of people don't really care about. But I always thought it was nice to have a turn down service. You know, they're limiting the amount of, you know, plates that you can get in the main dining room. They'll start charging you, most cruise lines, after some point. You know, when I first started cruising on Carnival, you could get weird exotic stuff like escargot every night. But a lot of that stuff's changed. But I'm pretty sure they probably worked the math out going, okay, if we lose 10 or 20% of our loyal cruisers, we have so many new people coming in that this is going to be their standard. They're not even going to know. I think that's going to, you know, everybody likes to complain about the good old days, but give it 5 years and most everybody will be new anyways, right? Like the majority of the people. So, yeah, you know, if it was just a flip of the switch and I could say tablecloth versus no tablecloth, I would take the tablecloth. I think it's a nicer dining experience, but it's not gonna ruin my day if I don't have the tablecloth. Here's a really, really important question. So of the cruise lines that you've been on, Royal, Carnival, Norwegian, who has the best pizza?
I'm going to believe it or not, I'm going to give it to Carnival. I think Carnival has done a fantastic job with their pizza. I was impressed on the Jubilee. I was very happy with the pizza selection. I love Norwegian, but I mean, when I was on the Prima, they just had the one restaurant that was at night. What was it's called? I forget what it's called. But the local. They just had the local. There was no late night pizza. I was like, what's going on?
No LNP on Norwegian. And I love the local. Like, I love the local on the Bliss and all those other ships other than the Prima. I don't know why they made it so much less inviting, and that was a bummer because, I can't remember who, somebody was cruising with us, and they'd never cruised Norwegian before, and it's before we were on the Prima. I think we had a group cruise on there, and I was like, man, this local's where it's at. You can get chicken wings, or you get it all night long. It's a beautiful thing. It's a real cool, it's a nice vibe. And then we went and we were like, it's like a room in the back. I'm like, what are we doing over here? But yeah, that's true about Norwegian. So no LMP. So I guess we should qualify. You like regular Pizza Pirate, or what do they call it on the Jubilee? The Capitano, or
Yeah.
the slice. I do love that. I love the fact on those XL ships that they're also having localized pizza there. Like, you can get Miami style pizza on the Celebration. You get Texas style pizza on the Jubilee. So that's the pizza you like, not the new square midnight buffet pizza, right?
I'm actually, here's the thing, man. I'm pretty indiscriminate when it comes to, as long as you have something to offer. Like I love that they've actually had like a midnight buffet come back, because I've been saying for the longest time, like I remembered on my very first cruise, which was on Royal Caribbean many, many moons ago on the Rhapsody of the Seas, that they had a midnight buffet. They did. I don't think they had it every night, but I think they had it like every other night. And I thought it was just so cool. And, people are just never happy. Like I do feel for the cruise lines. I do feel for them, because it's like, they had the late night pizza for so long, and then people are like, that's it. Sometimes I want more than just pizza. I want something else. And so Carnival's like, good news, guys. We have a late night buffet. And then people are like, you're shutting down the pizza place. And I could feel the frustration for Carnival, because you just can't make everybody happy. It's just not possible. The truth is, I loved the late night offerings. When I was on the Jubilee, it was before they actually called it the midnight buffet, but I think they were testing it out, and it was just snacks that they put out. I liked the square pizza. I mean, the truth is, let's be honest, past midnight, you're usually drinking, you're usually gambling, I don't know about you, but I'm a lot less, I'm very indiscriminate with it's like, does it look yummy? Is it pretty edible? It will do.
I think I'm just spite hating that pizza, because one of my favorite things, but before the shutdown, the pizza used to be 24 hours. That regular pizza used to be 24 hours. And like we've already established, I hate waiting in line. And so I would eat pizza at 6 a.m. Like instead of eating regular breakfast, I would eat regular breakfast later too. Let's not get that twisted, but I would get up early and I would go, and there would be nobody at the pizza place, and I would get like a fresh, pizza with the prosciutto and the, arugula. I love that pizza over there in Carnival. So I think I'm just spite hating the square. I'm like, what's the saying? Pizza, when it's good, it's really good. And when it's bad, well, it's usually still pretty good. So I guess I'll give in on that point. But yeah, it hurt my feelings when late night pizza went away, the old school. But again, I think for Carnival, the way they compete the best is to just display that low price point and get people in. And then they, it's really not a cheap cruise. Like, if you look at the total cost of cruising, you get there and you're like, oh, okay, well, I got in the door for $400. Would you like drinks? Oh yeah, I'd like drinks. There's $1,000. Would you like some internet? Yeah, I'd like the internet, so it's, by the time you stack everything on that you want, and some people are going, I've done that before, where I just go and do the base and whatever came with it, that's all I do. So, I think that's going to continue to be Carnival's play. And again, I feel like I'm like an old man, get off my lawn. Like, I hate the way things are, it used to be 2 times a day. So, I still love it though. It's still my favorite, cruising experience. But what's a good question to wrap this up on? People that in your life that get sick of you talking about cruising, that have never been on a cruise, and I think that's in all of our lives. What's the one statement that you can say that you can tell people why cruising is appealing?
The value. I feel like you just get so much. I mean, yes, you're absolutely right. The costs are definitely going up. They seem to be taking away a lot of the things that a lot of us older cruisers have loved and cherished. But at the end of the day, they still offer such a tremendous value. I mean, you basically get on this ship and you get to go to different locations. Okay, we can argue about how long you're in these locations, but you get to go to these different locations. You get to come back to your same cabin, your same area. You get all this entertainment. You get all of this food. At the end of the day, it's still a really great value. I think that it's going to continue to be that way. I mean, I hope there doesn't come a time where you're like, wow, it's not a value anymore. But I mean, even with the drink prices and with the internet prices, it's honestly just a pretty great place for multi-generations to hang out, from grandma to the kids. The whole family can go and honestly have a totally different experience, but yet still come together in the same location in a way that it's really hard to do in other places. I mean, you've got the last cruise that I went on, we had everyone from, I think, 18 all the way up to 73, and everybody had a blast. They all did different things, mind you. Obviously, the 18-year-olds like going off and ziplining, and my mom, who's the nana, she's instead listening to the conga band. She's listening to music and watching the shows and doing all the things. And then you've got those of us somewhere in the middle that gambling and I didn't zip line, but doing a little more active stuff, but also enjoying the shows as well. And I think there are very few vacations that you can cover that much ground for that price point and make so many people happy. And that is why I love cruising. That's why I'm always recommending cruising to people. And a lot of people, especially with the smaller ships back in the day when I would hype up cruising, people were just like, I can't stand being in the same location and then feeling like I can't get off the ship. And then, just seeing the same faces with these mega ships now, as large as they are. I mean, it takes days to fully explore the ship. That's been the main criticism with like Utopia, for example. Utopia has been a smashing success. I think I saw your video where you went on Utopia. I would love to go on Utopia. I just heard the best things about it. But the only criticism that I've really heard about Utopia is that it's so big and you're only on it for a small amount of time that there's no way you can do everything and see everything. And so even for people that necessarily don't want to, be trapped in one location, thanks to these megaships, I've explained, like, it's huge. You have a huge area to be in where you're not going to feel that confined. And to be honest with you barely even feel the ocean on these big ships. I mean, unless the seas are just particularly rocky. And even then, it's nothing compared to what it used to be, on the smaller ships. But the value, I just think that there's such a value, and they just bring joy to so many different types of people. And that's why I keep coming back to it. That's why I love it the way that I do.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, I can't think of another vacation type that offers you more for what you pay. And really the flexibility, like you said, traveling with family. It's beautiful that everybody doesn't have to do the same thing together all the time, 24/7, but people can go do their own thing and still easily get back together on a cruise ship side. Yep, I agree. Well, Mandy, the cruise planner, that is the TikTok channel. That's also on all the other socials, right? Instagram,
Right.
YouTube, the whole 9 yards. I appreciate it. I appreciate you spending some time talking to me about Texas cruising and cruising in general. It was really good to get to know you a little bit, and I appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
There you go. It was so great talking to Mandy. A lot of great information about Texan cruising and cruising in general. Make sure you go follow her over there on TikTok if you do the TikTok. But if not, she's on all of the other social media platforms. Look, there's an audio version of this podcast. If you would like that anywhere that you get your audio podcast, please do me a favor. I would love to hear your feedback on these podcasts. I'm trying to get into a better cadence about doing them. So if you could leave a comment below, that would be great. Also, don't be out there cruising and traveling without travel insurance. You can get a free quote from insuremytrip.com. There's a link in the description below. Thank you guys so much for checking out this episode. Make sure you're subscribed to the Cruise Talk Network. This is Tony for La Lido Loca. Until the next time, we'll see you on the Lido. Bye.